So really quick for future reference, because I've absorbed a lot of information over the last couple of days. When you do these live Zooms, if for any reason I'm unable to make a live, they are recorded, correct?
Yes, that is correct. I
Okay.
record them all, and then the way I've been doing it for like the last year or so, I save them and I put them on YouTube, and then I send the link to the class in the announcement section so
Okay.
that you can go and watch it at your leisure.
Okay.
Yeah. How long have you been with Central Christian College?
Oh, just started.
Oh, okay.
Just
Is
started.
this your very first class?
Very first class.
Oh boy, oh boy. Okay. Well,
Mm-hmm.
congratulations and welcome.
Thank you.
I've been teaching for Central Christian College coming up on 3 years. I think January will be my anniversary of 3 years, so about 2.5 years, I guess.
Oh,
I love
wow.
it. I teach also at Palm Beach Atlantic University, which is another Christian university.
Okay.
And my sort of main job, I'm a guidance director for Broward County Schools down here in Southeast Florida.
Oh, awesome.
So I'm an adjunct professor. Like most, I think 65 or 67% of college professors are adjunct professors, believe it or not, across all universities and
Oh,
colleges
wow.
in the country. Yeah, a lot of them are. We do that. Um, so yeah, well, welcome. Yeah, the Zooms they should always be recorded. Now, a lot of times when I first started, we used to save them right in the course room. But for some reason, I'm not sure if I'm the only one that's not able to do that, but I'm not able to. Nevertheless, I do save them and I put them on YouTube. You'll get the direct link to that. So even if you want to go back and, watch anything now, um,
Okay.
after we finish this one, Gina, are I'm most grateful that you're in the class live in the Zoom room with me here. I
Mm-hmm.
have some things I'm going to go through on the slides, and I'll share some things that are kind of outside or in addition to the course. That's what I
Okay.
like to do for these times. It's kind of like a real class situation. I don't necessarily go over a lecture, as it were. The idea is that you have your book, you have your PowerPoint slides, you have the entire internet, along with all the other videos that are supplied here. So that's all there for you. It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially working with adult learners, for me to sort of reiterate those things. That's all there for you. That being said, if you're unclear on something or you have a question or want some more to go a little bit more in depth, then obviously that's what I'm here to do. But what
Okay.
I like to do on these Zoom rooms or class lives is a couple of things. One, I like to get to know the students a little better, and you'll find as you go along. Unfortunately, these aren't required. Now you're going to get extra credit points, which are over and above it's only 2 points, but it's in addition to any other points you get, so that actually helps your grade. And you get those 2 points whether you watch live in real time,
Mm-hmm.
or if you watch the recording. Now what'll happen is, if you watch the recording in the future, or anyone else, I'll give some kind of either I give a Bible scripture, or I'll mention something in the class live that you'll have to tell me in the message board, so that I know that you actually watched the recording, and then I'll give
Okay.
you 2 points. Um,
Gotcha.
but going back a little bit, again, I like to build a relationship and get to know people here. But what I was going to say is, most students don't come. It's unfortunate. I wish more students did come. It makes it easier for me, and
Mm-hmm.
more enjoyable, I think, for everyone, even on the recording, to watch. It's not a lot of fun just watching me go on and on and on. So we'll have some back and forth. I'll get your feedback and your ideas as well, and just kind of guide a conversation through the notes and the PowerPoint slides that I've selected for this. Okay?
So if there were any other students on here today, would I be able to see them just as I see you?
You most certainly would.
Oh, okay.
Um, the only in this, unless they didn't use their video camera, which
Oh, okay.
happens sometimes. Like they say their video camera's not working, but it's usually that it works just like this. So you'd see maybe 4 or 5 other people around your screen, just like you and I are seeing each other now.
Okay.
All right. So.
Very neat.
All right. Yeah. Cool. So I'm excited that this is your first class. So let me do what I was mentioning before, and build a little bit of of a class culture here. I did read your intro. I remember seeing your name, but it's one thing to see something in text, and then another thing to put that with a person that you can kind of see in front. Even those little pictures that they have with, that you come with your text, it's hard to see. For me, it's hard to see those.
Uh-huh.
So remind me a little bit. You have a family?
I do. I have 3 very small children. My son is 4, my daughter Braylee is 3, and then my youngest Stevie Ray is 1.5. She'll be 2 in November. So at that point, my husband and I can say we have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
Uh-huh.
So to say we're busy is quite an understatement. We also have a business alongside with my parents that we are in the process of getting out of. And so pursuing a career in lactation consulting since I've had my son, has been like my ideal, my dream job.
Mm-hmm.
And so after talking to my husband, we were just like, I think now is the perfect time for you to go back to school and get the certification and start a new career path. So that's why I'm able to join today, is because my schedule is very flexible, because I essentially kind of work for myself and make my own schedule, which makes it hard to work in the office, because all day today I had to focus on getting my work done, when all I wanted to do, I just wanted to jump in my textbook and start reading. Right? So it's just a little.
And I may have alluded to this in your message in your introduction. Being an adult student and working online has a lot of benefits to it, but the work's still there. The work's got to get done. And you seem like a person with a business and 3 kids. You understand how to prioritize things, and you have you're responsible and things like that. But not having to travel to a university or to a class is convenient, but it doesn't make it any easier necessarily. That's one of the things that, when people ask me about the difference between teaching online and teaching on campus in a brick and mortar, and I do both. It's in many ways more convenient to teach online, but in some ways it's harder, and you'll maybe see some of that. Had you been to college previously?
It's been several years. I mean, before I was married, before any of that, I went to a community college, Austin Community College, and took some classes, and just kind of fluttered around and just made some poor decisions, and my younger years. But you're right. I mean, now there's certain things that in life, I mean, my kids, they have to be fed, they have to be, changed and bathed. And I mean, those things just don't stop. And so with this, I'm really learning accountability, because I have to hold myself accountable, just, which, and like, I see your point, like it makes it harder doing it online, because if I were going to an actual classroom, then I'm actually physically, scheduling actual time where I have to be there. And as with this, there's more flexibility, which can kind of be a gateway to, what's what I'm looking for? Becoming more lax, I guess. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely sure. Yeah, when you have to be at a class at a certain time, that decision is made for you. Now you have to decide, am I going to do this in the morning, in the evening? And, I have to, I cannot neglect my kids and my other responsibilities.
Kind of like a gym membership. If you sign up with a personal trainer and you actually have, like, you're taking your time and their time, then you're more likely to go to that personal trainer, as opposed to just a gym membership where it's like, well, maybe I can squeeze in 30 minutes here, but if I don't get to it, well, then maybe I can do it, first thing in the morning. And there's, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of how I see it.
So, a lactose consultant?
Lactation
consultant. I'm sorry. Okay. I've heard the term before a little bit. Is there a big, for lack of a better term, market for that type of professional?
Yes and no. In Austin, I don't know that there's a high demand for them. I think where I live, I actually live about 45 minutes east outside of Austin in a smaller rural area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing out here. So ideally, I would like to market to my surrounding, communities here. Otherwise, you're traveling all the way into Austin,
Mm-hmm.
and when you've just had a baby, especially if it's your first baby, and driving an hour to go see someone can be very taxing on you, especially when you're carrying a newborn with you, and if you're going by yourself. And so as far as Austin itself, I mean, there's only so many hospitals, so those positions are kind of filled. And so I really like to target these smaller areas to see if there's a market there, and if not, then
interesting.
Go to the big city.
Yeah, and would this be something that you worked as a business?
Ideally, yes.
Okay.
Kind of like, I guess freelance, is that like the right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of starting my own business, mostly traveling to my clients and not so much bringing them to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I had my son, which was my firstborn, there were so many things that people just did not prepare me for. And as I'm looking at this first slide, I'm like, the postpartum period is
right.
Like sometimes they call it the fourth trimester, because so many things happen to you physically, mentally, emotionally. And when I had my son, I just thought it was going to be this euphoric time, and he was going to know exactly what to do in terms of nursing, and I was going to know exactly what to do, and it was going to be beautiful and harmonious. And oh my gosh, it was nothing like that. And I didn't have any support. My husband didn't know what to do. I mean, I was one of the first of my friends that had kids, and so in becoming a lactation consultant, I also would like to provide some kind of postpartum life coach support too. Just something.
Fantastic, Gina. And I love several things in life. I mean, when I say love, I mean fields. I'm talking about passion. I love my wife. I love God, of course, but I love psychology, and I also love business. And my PhD is in organizational psychology, which is where business and psychology meet, and how to, encompasses a lot of things: team building, hiring, employee retention, all these many things, which I won't get into now. But when I first read that, I'm thinking, of all the things a person that is pursuing what you want to do could do in terms of what you just mentioned. Coaching a lot of ways, beyond, just what you're focusing on, like you mentioned, the postpartum depression, relationship management, those kinds of things. And who knows? I mean, this could turn into a, I'll say very lucrative, but it's more than that. I mean, a very worthwhile ministry, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely.
For people who need it, and as you said, even yourself, many people are not prepared for that. I can relate. My children now are 24 and 23. My son will soon be 25. They're 19 months apart. So I remember built a sermon around when my son was born. Like, are you kidding me? I have no idea. And I was in my 30s. I wasn't a spring chicken. So, and I see Andrea's doing this. I'm going to get you just in a second, Andrea. Hang in there.
Okay.
Good. But yeah, and it's like, oh my goodness, what do I do? And I my wife was, and she probably looked at me and says, oh my gosh, I'm going to with this guy. This is my support. So, she's fantastic. But yeah, she probably could have used, I did the best I could. But yeah, she probably could have used, her mom came down for a little bit and things like that. But it's also nice to have someone who's not family.
Exactly.
To do that. So my mind's racing with all the things that this could develop into. So anyway, and as you mentioned, the postpartum depression and things like that. So we're going to get into lecture proper, if you will, because this is a perfect segue. However, I see Andrea has joined us. Is it Andrea or Andrea?
It's Andrea.
Andrea. Okay, Andrea. Were you in just a minute ago as well?
Yes, sir. I was, I guess I was trying to switch around or something. I don't know what was going on. But,
Okay, Andrea. Well, that's fine. I am, believe it or not, when I do anything with the computer, I amaze myself because I never thought I'd even own one of these things. And look at me now. You can see, we're talking across the country. Where are you from, Andrea? Where are you calling in from?
Oklahoma.
All right, so we got some Texas and Oklahoma and everything. Good thing. Is your video camera working, Andrea? Because all I see is your name there. Do you have a video camera?
Okay. Well, I will fix that here just momentarily. Can you see me now?
No, I can't. I see your name. When you go up to, there you are. Okay, there you are. And I saw you before. There you are.
Yeah, all right. Hi. It's been a few days since I've done this. So, yeah, I'm from Oklahoma, around the Fort Sill area.
Okay.
My husband and I are both veterans. He retired. I'm a 10-year veteran. And so currently I operate a veterans center.
Oh.
And then my husband's in law enforcement. And I actually have a 22-year-old, about to be 23-year-old pregnant daughter living at home right now who's about to give birth to our first grandchild.
Wow,
so
congratulations.
I'm listening with wide ears right now.
Sure.
It's obviously been a few days.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this is the right place for, we got, Gina has young children and you're about to become a grandma. So yeah, we'll go through this.
Yeah.
And some of these things are really going to resonate with you, I believe. If you get a chance, Andrea, go back and look at, I won't rehash everything that we talked about, but I'll just recap. I try and build a kind of a class culture in these Zoom rooms. It's not about me shoving information down your throat because we don't really have enough time to do that. But I'll hit on some of the key things and I'll try and bring in some of my life experiences and some things that I can add along with the course. So thank you for your service, and you and your husband's. I'm grateful for that. I really am. I mean that. That's wonderful. And he retired after 20-something years. Did I hear you right, Andrea?
Yes, he spent 22 years and I spent 10. So.
Good. So hopefully he's getting a nice pension. I'm sure not as much as he deserves, but it is one thing. A buddy of mine, he did a little over 20 years in the Air Force, and he's drawing that little pension, which is good for him. He deserves it. So, all right. We will get right now. What do you do do you work, Andrea? You have a nonprofit. Is that right?
Yes, I operate a veterans center.
That's right.
With the disabled American veterans. And so I'll be graduating here from Central Christian in December. This will be my third graduation. My husband graduated in May. And so we kind of took that on again to kind of set an example. Our kids were graduating high school. Sure. And they stair-stepped literally like 4 years in a row or so. And then we're skipping like 2 years, and then we'll have the youngest one graduate. So we kind of took it on, and I used my my GI Bill this time to do some psychology for counseling for veterans with PTSD. I thought this might be of some service. It's kind of like 45 minutes either way to get to the VA hospital for counseling service. So thought it might be come in handy or be useful. Yeah. So, and we kind of want to set an example to all the kids that are kind of graduating, to our kids, like, if we're this old and we've done this much service and we can do it again, then you can too. So. Right.
Yeah, there's I think the stats are 65 or 70% chance, greater chance that your children will finish college if you finish college. So there's something to be said for that. So we'll get right into it here. I open up, this is one of the first slides I just want to talk about a little bit. I recently saw, and you're both moms, so you obviously probably could speak to me more about postpartum depression than I could speak to you about it. So let me not kid myself. I know what I've read. I know I've talked to my wife and others and counseled some people along the way. But I recently read, I saw the title of a study, that talks that mentions that men often, or so sometimes, I guess I should say, may also go through a postpartum depression. It'll be interesting to see. I'll go back and read that article when I get a chance. It'll be interesting to see where they took the study from. How valid and reliable that study is. I don't think. I think I went through postpartum terror, but I didn't feel depressed. I fortunately felt that elation of being a father and seeing my son there, and then later on my daughter and my wife. So it'll be interesting to see that. But when I first was starting my career, actually starting college, postpartum depression was around. Actually, I think it's been around forever, but it wasn't talked about not nearly as much in the informal way. It was written about in journals and things like that. It was a different time, at least where I was, and both of you being from the South may relate, because I originally was born in Kentucky. So my family, right or wrong, kind of was, women have a bigger cross to bear than men, and just kind of be quiet and move on. I don't know if that was always right, but that was kind of where we were. The women's movement and things like that was nowhere around, whatever side you're on that. But that was just kind of the way it was. Like, you just kind of gotta, nobody cares if you're sad. In fact, as we do care, but that's where it was. Fortunately, I think that it's talked about more and common. People talk about it, and it's not a secret, and it's not taboo, and it's not something made up. We realize that. And one of the things we talked about this week was the difference between nurture and nature, nature being biological. We know that there's biological reasons that women go through this. There's no question about it. We see a difference in their hormone levels and things such as that. It's no one's fault. No one's just feeling sad for themselves. No one's just having a pity party. People are going through a rough time, and we need to address that. So it is something to be aware of. It'll be something to be aware of, as the grandbaby comes along as well. There are extreme examples, not as common. There is postpartum depression, and there's also postpartum blues. Pretty much, I think it's kind of accepted in the professional community that every woman's going to go at least through postpartum blues. Postpartum blues are not nearly as severe as postpartum depression, don't last as long. But that's a given that pretty much everyone will have that. Postpartum depression varies. Not everyone goes through it to the same extent, at least. Some people go through it much worse than others, and there are some times to really be concerned. Those, the warning signs are there. You wouldn't miss them. And that'd be something that you would reach out to your professional, your OBGYN or a counselor, or even the pediatrician, to talk about those things. So I don't want to mess with this slide. What I really want to talk and what I really want to drive the conversation, what I want to drive the conversation here is the bonding that happens between mother and child, parent and child. This can't be overstated. The need for the child to have a lot of tactile contact, massages, hugs, being spoken to, given a lot of attention, making sure the baby has enough to eat and things like that. The absence of that can lead to reactive attachment disorder. We're going to get into a little bit more of that in just a moment. But tell me, I'll start with Andrea, since you were last. I'm going to start with you. Is that something that was talked about, say, when you had your first child? Did people sort of counsel you to make sure that you spend a lot of time in tactile contact and things like that with your newborns?
Yes, but not like they do today, because I feel like that it's the postpartum, as well as depression of every category, is recognized on a larger scale, and in a, I don't know, it's much more recognized today and dealt with in ways that it wasn't dealt with 23 years ago when I gave birth to my first child. But being a different time than whenever I grew up, you know, I mean, we see things when we're growing up that we kind of like, oh, I want to change that, you know, when I become a parent. So obviously I wanted to be a more loving, you know, as far as like hugging and telling, you know, loving on my children, you know, and then of course as they got older, you know, telling them that I was proud of them for doing good at this or that, you know, and rewarding them, you know, for good behavior, good grades, so on and so forth. You know?
Yeah, you actually make a very good point. I mentioned, you know, people are more aware of postpartum depression these days. They're much more aware of all kinds of depression these days. That's a good point to bring up. Depression's, you know, it is called the common cold of mental illness for a lot of reasons. One, it's very common. Two, people can kind of go on with their life, even, you know, with a lot of the depressions. There are some that are severe. But yeah, you make a very good point. Gina, what about when, you know, 5 years ago or so, when you had your first, what kind of counseling or you know, advice did you get?
Post baby or post baby. I didn't get a whole lot, honestly. I actually did suffer the baby blues for about the first 4 months after my son was born, and I'd never even heard of it. I'd heard of postpartum depression, but I didn't know about the baby blues, and I literally cried uncontrollably for 4 months for no reason. Like, he was just sleeping in his swing, and I just look at him and just burst into tears, and all these, I guess it was like a really overwhelming love for him, that all these thoughts started running through my head of children who, you know, were abused or abandoned, you know, even in the hospital. Just all these things were coming into my thought process, and I couldn't shut it off. And I did talk to my OBGYN about it. She did give me a prescription, but I didn't want to take it. I'm fearful of, you know, certain pharmaceutical drugs. But I mean, yeah, that's part of what I'm, you know, trying to achieve in my career path is that. So I don't know if I answered your question correctly or not, but
no, you absolutely did. Yes.
Yeah. And my mother, I mean, I'm 34, so the last time when I had my son, I was 30. So the last time she had a baby was 30 years ago at that point. And she didn't understand what I was going through, you know, and my husband, I mean, he just wanted to fix it and make it right, and there was nothing, nothing he could do, but just hold me and let me cry. And then eventually it, you know, got better, and a lot of it had to do with, you know, the breastfeeding, and all the emotions that go along with that. And he wasn't eating, and we were having to feed him through a syringe and every 2 hours, and you know, I was exhausted, and just so all these things that I didn't know about.
Right. Sure. No. Well, yeah. And I'm, you know, I reflect on the Bible, and you know, back before sin, you know, none of this would have been a problem. You know, God was very specific that childbirth is going to be a problem now. I mean, he's very direct about that. You know, I think, like, what was it going to be like before? Like, wow, it would have been like nothing to it. I guess there was no pain, nothing like that. So
maybe the euphoria I was talking about, maybe that's what it was.
Right, sure. and you know, the good news is for me, and you as well. You know, I don't know that there'll be births in the new kingdom, but we won't have any of these things to go on. But yeah, it's a good reflection, both spiritually and from a psychological and even medical standpoint, if you will. Yeah, I think, a lot of thoughts will come in your mind, and you've gone through a major ordeal when that happens. And it wasn't. I use the word traumatic in the broadest sense, but it was over a 9-month period, and and 4 months after that. So that's a big deal. It's like sometimes when I'm teaching this class, I think about what would it be, because I'll never experience it. What's it like to have another person living inside my stomach? Like
I miss it every single day.
Yeah, right. Like it really is. It's like that is really just wild,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah. So one of the things I do want to touch on though is the importance of, and I think we do know now, of really spending time with that newborn. And like I said before, giving the massages, making sure that they have enough to eat. One of the things I want to make sure that I don't neglect to say is, as babies get a little bit older, from the get-go, we're with them. And Andrea talked about praising them, verbally as they got a little bit older with their grades and their activities and things like that, which is also important. But one of the things that we run a risk of if we're too attentive, and again, that's not necessarily the best term, is we have to allow them after they get to a certain point to find a way to self-soothe themselves. Mm-hmm. If we run to them, every time they scratch their finger or fall down, they don't need that. They need our help, and we need to make sure that we're watching them. But we also need to watch them learn how to figure things out for themselves. Now, this is as they get like, a year and a half, 2 years. We're moving on down the line a little bit. But and I only point that out because I want to say in the beginning, it's quite important that we do build that relationship with them, which really started in vitro because they recognize sounds very early on. And this is one of the personal stories I'll share. When my son was born, my wife we weren't planning a C-section, but we had to have a C-section. And Charlie, my son, he came out, and we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl. We didn't find out. Well, the doctor, we didn't know. He didn't tell us. We told him not to. And then I saw that it was a boy, so I said, "Oh, Charlie," hello, Charlie, or something like that. And then while they can't really see that well, they can hear, and he kind of looked my way. And it seemed like there was 100 people in the delivery room. There was, but it seemed like there was. And they all kind of gave this collective gasp, like, oh, he recognizes your voice, because I had read to him and everything, and been around and talked and things like that. So, the bond starts even before birth, and with mom and dad and others. So they recognize that. They do recognize faces. They recognize eyes. So, early on, and we're still learning things. So it's important that we do continue to build that bond so that they do have what we call a healthy attachment. I mentioned the disorder before was a reactive attachment disorder. That's for your ab psych class down the road. But we want them to have what we call a healthy attachment, which means they know that they can count on someone to help them if they need help, but they also learn how to solve certain problems on their own. Now that gets, that's way deeper than this, that's a conversation that goes way deeper than this, Zoom room. But that kind of touches on the surface of the importance of, like I said, giving those massages, giving baths, talking to them, and things such as that. There was a 60 Minute or something special some years ago about some of the orphans in Eastern Europe who were kind of just sort of warehoused in a orphanage, and they didn't get any of that. And a lot of those kids were adopted by United States people, U.S. citizens, and a lot of those kids ended up diagnosed with the reactive attachment disorder because they weren't getting that tactile contact and things such as that. So I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm going to go on and get a couple more slides here before I let you go. These are some of the things that the pediatricians go through. You may be familiar with some of these things. It's good to review those things. And I just want to point out, I wanted to stop on this slide to point out, when I was, again, just starting out, I've loved psychology my entire life. Talking about, do humans have reflexes or instincts? Reflexes is what the slide says. I say instincts because, birds know to fly south in the winter, and, different animals, turtles know to move towards the ocean. after they're hatched on the beach and things like that. And there was a time when people kind of talk about humans have no instincts, so they need their parents. Well, then we started, looking more at it, and I started reading more. Well, yeah, babies, they suck. You put a nipple in their mouth, and they know to suck to get food. So that was considered then an instinct or a reflex. Well, now if you look at the slide, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reflexes, or I'll go as far as to say instincts, because there is some back and forth on that, but I call these instincts, like the rooting reflex. And if you're not familiar, I'm pretty sure you are, but if you put like your finger on a baby's cheek, the baby will move that way thinking, oh, there's food there. So we call that the rooting reflex and things such as that. And then obviously it gets it into here. Let's see, talk about the baby's vision, things like that. Oh yeah, babies, they know their mother's smell. They identify with them and dads too, for that matter. Yeah, it gets into here, some of the touches and reflexes that can happen due to touch. So I'm not going to keep you on here much longer. I just want to encourage you to go ahead and pay attention to the slides, pay attention to the videos, as well as the textbook reading and things like that. As this is a class, a 6-week class, it's it's not abbreviated, it's accelerated. So you're actually getting a full semester within 6 weeks, and you can tell. Andrea can attest to this, Gina. The courses at CC, because I didn't mention, Gina, this is her very first course, Andrea. So, and you're about to graduate, so you can let her know that you do a lot of work. You do a semester's worth of work in 6 weeks. So not playing around. But we're going to cover the entire lifespan. So we're starting here. We start like with the sperm and the egg. You read already, right? So that's where we're starting. Now this is not it's not med school, so we don't spend a whole lot of time on that. We're going to get into beyond this as you go forward is into childhood, teenage years, young adulthood, on into elderly, and even talking about death at the end. So we're going to jam pack a lot of things in here. But I want to give you both just a moment for any questions or comments before we get out of here, because I'll let you go pretty soon. Gina, anything?
Nothing that comes to mind. I'm looking forward to the early years, especially those toddler years. They're pretty rough. Andrea, I don't know if you remember those toddler years, but oh my goodness.
Yes. Those terrible twos actually start before they're 2, and they run up into the 4 to 5s. That 2 range is not an accurate number. And in closing, I just want to say that Dr. Nicholas said that this was your first class here at CCCK. So as you can see, I already have my pre-graduation t-shirt on because my husband graduated back in May, and I actually went to the campus for that. I want to wish you luck, and the days when you get frustrated, because there's nights that I sit here like really late writing papers and stuff, and having a pregnant daughter at home. We have 5 kids, and my husband's in law enforcement, and we've already done like 20 years of work in our prior jobs and stuff, and you can do it though. You can do it, and the good thing, if you just put your mind to it, and you just like on Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays, you do your discussion questions and your replies. And then you do your applies and you do your reading in between. I guarantee you make that little personal schedule, and you don't stray away from that, even if your kids have crises, they can't live without you.
Yeah, gosh.
Before you go to bed, you can make time for that, even if it's on your lunch break at work, and you can do it, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can do it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I haven't been in school for a long time.
I have 5 kids. This is my 3rd time to graduate. I have an associate's, a bachelor's report, and now this is another one. And this, you can do it.
Awesome.
You can do it. It is possible. You can do it.
Thank you.
I have confidence.
Right.
All right, guys. You guys have a good night.
Let me,
All
if
right.
I can, just what I want to do before we go. I want to give you. Oh, I got to go. Yeah, okay. As you're about to have a grandchild, Andrea and Gina, I'm going to give you, and this is going to be the key for those who watch the recording to get their extra credit points. I'm not going to use the Bible scripture this time. I'm going to give you it's kind of a website. It's a fella named Jim Fay. He's a PhD kind of guy, and he's made a nice career out of helping parents. His website or his company. This is what you need to tell me in the chat and the message board in order to get your points. His organization is called Love and Logic. I highly recommend that you go to the website, look up Love and Logic. If you put that in Google search, it'll go to Jim Fay and his organization, and he has like short little blogs that he writes. He has videos. They offer some training too. They're out west. I've wanted to go for a while, but it's kind of far from me just to get the sort of certification. But he gives great advice.
I think he has a book.
Oh, he's got a couple books up there. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. If I was doing what he was doing, he's saying what I would be saying. What he's saying. I highly recommend him. So yeah, for the little ones, like how to deal with kids and things like that, and and he's really good, and he's about love and all those kind of things. He's done a lot of work specifically on this. So Love and Logic. That's what you have to tell me in the chat, on the message board, I should say. And I highly recommend that you take a look at that. Anyone who has kids, or anyone who knows someone who has kids, I'm always quoting him and referring him, and having like I'll sit and talk with parents sometimes. I do my thing, and that's part of their homework, is to go up and read some of what he said, and they'll see somebody else is saying exactly what I'm saying. So that'll be it. I want to say just a quick prayer, and then if it's okay, and then
Absolutely.
Father, I just thank you so much for Gina and Andrea, that they were able to join me. I thank you for their families as well. I thank you for the other students. I ask a blessing for them as well. This is can be a challenge, Father. You already know. You know the end from the beginning. Father, I pray for the students that they are doing what they need to do to fulfill your purpose in their life, as myself as well, Father. I pray that. So I pray that you will guide our steps, that you will bless our efforts, and that you will comfort us when things get hard. Give us strength to move forward when it is your will that we're fulfilling, and that you bless us with health and happiness with ourselves and our families. All of these things I pray in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Ladies, thank you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And then we're going to do that. And then